Mike Marsh, United States Army, Vietnam. Mike enlisted in the military in 1967 at the age of 21. Vietnam was raging at that time. He wanted to be an Army paratrooper, and he went to basic training, advanced training, went to Fort Bragg and trained to become an Army paratrooper. He was in Vietnam with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, 2nd Battalion, 503rd Airborne Infantry. Folks, he was the real deal, and not too bad for a kid from Denver, Colorado, as he puts it. He's got a great story. He's one of these unsung heroes that's been in my archives, and I'm just so happy to share his story on my YouTube channel and on my radio station, Voices of History Radio. I interviewed Mike in Longmont, Colorado. It was April 7th, 2007, almost 17 years ago. He's about 77 today. He was 60, I believe, when I interviewed him. So the Vietnam veterans, folks, are about the same age as the World War II veterans were when I started interviewing them 21 years ago in Arizona. Wow, just time is flying by, I'll tell you what. And I'm just glad we get to share Mike's story with my YouTube audience today. Michael and Darlene Sarofsky in the Denver area, thank you again for making it possible for others to learn about the history of Vietnam and Korean War, the World War II, all the wars that we fought, folks. Thank you, Michael and Darlene. You're making it possible for others to hear through the eyes and ears of Mike Marsh today. And I'm happy to be working with you this year. I'm excited, and I appreciate you guys. Folks, share these stories with our younger generation especially. We're living in a day right now, a lot of troubled times in this country. As Father Bradley told me years ago from Long Branch, New Jersey at the age of 91, the enemy is already here. And folks, the communism that these veterans fought against, like Mike Marsh, it's here. And we need to stand up and take a stand for what's right. And I'm not preaching at you, I'm just telling you the way it is. And these veterans have done their job, and then now it's our turn. It's our turn. The mantle's been passed. We need to fight for them. And one way we can do is empowering others with these stories. So I would invite you to invite your kids, your grandkids, your friends, your families, others that are in the military. It's quite a process here. All these stories I'm hearing from my viewers, through all these stories, they're getting a great, well-rounded picture of what Vietnam was like. It's amazing to hear one or two stories, but to hear hundreds of stories, several hundreds of stories of the same thing, you really get a good idea of what it was like being there. And that's what I'm so proud of this channel, my radio station. So share these stories, subscribe to this channel. Let's keep this thing going, folks. And I'll talk to you on my next broadcast. God bless you. Vietnam?
1967.
Okay, how old were you then?
I was 21 years old.
21?
Yes.
Wow. Did you enlist?
I did.
And did you feel a real sense of duty to serve your country then, like a lot of people did?
I was immensely interested in it. I was in college and I'd written a paper about Vietnam, and I was a young man looking for some adventure, so I decided to become a United States Army paratrooper.
And what was the mood of the country and your peers at that time towards Vietnam?
Even then it was mixed. There was a lot of people highly in favor of what they considered to be a worthwhile cause. There was the rumblings and the ruminations of the new left rising, and the media certainly doing everything they could to augment that.
So where'd you go to your basic training?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
So during training, are you thinking of thoughts of going to Vietnam someday? Is that what they're preparing you for?
Absolutely.
And was there any fear at that time, or apprehension, or anxiety towards that?
Not Not really anxiety, kind of a sense of, anticipation, youthful anticipation, I guess.
Did you ever have a thought that you might be killed or wounded or, or die for your country during that time?
That always crosses your mind. I think human nature has, people have a tendency to say, it won't be me. I felt very strongly I was a survivor.
That invincibility, it seems prevalent with the young people of that, going to war and all that, but you knew where you were headed.
Yes.
Yeah. So after your training, what do you remember about going in country the first time, Mike? Was the geography of Vietnam, the atmosphere, was it what you thought it was going to be?
We arrived on a troop ship at Quy Nhon. Naturally, there's the humidity, there's green water in the South China Sea, and when they issued ammunition and we got off the ship and then convoyed to our base camp, it was all new to me. I was just a kid from Denver, Colorado.
And so you're in country, you're in Vietnam. What was the unit you were assigned to?
I was assigned to the 173rd Airborne Brigade, 2nd Battalion, I went with 3rd Battalion, 503rd Airborne Infantry, and I transferred to the 2nd Battalion just a couple of months later.
And so you're there for a year, your tour starts.
Not quite a year.
Okay. Tell me about what happened day to day with you the first time you're in country. I hear the new guys weren't treated as well as some of the guys, the short timers or whatever they call them. How did you feel? How were you treated, and what were your first duties that you experienced there?
Well, I arrived with the Green Unit. We had trained together at Fort Bragg, so we began operations together. We didn't really have, we might have had 1 or 2 seasoned veterans with us, but for the most part, we were green, and we learned from our mistakes. Obviously, experience is a very, very good teacher. And as you become more aware of new guys and cherries, we called them, replacements, as time goes on and you're aware of the fact that they need to be counseled a lot with regards to safing your weapon or getting on a helicopter with a round in your chamber and that sort of thing, because accidents happen. We certainly had friendly fire accidents.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a lot of interaction with the helicopters in and out of areas? Is that how you were transported, basically?
Yes, we did a minimal amount of truck convoying, and I participated in about 27 helicopter assaults.
Take me on one that you remember. Maybe the one that was a hot LZ, or maybe there were more casualties, or friends that were wounded or killed, or aircraft shot down. What comes to mind when I ask you that question?
It's a pretty exhilarating experience. There are no doors on these helicopters, and you're sitting there, the seats are removed, and you're sitting in the helicopter facing out with your legs dangling, ready to put your feet on the skids. I was supposed to be a fire team leader, but I was actually a squad leader in a very short amount of time. And I made sure that on our chalks, what we called our helicopter loads, I was always the first guy off and the last guy on to make sure we had all of our, we call them chickens, all of our guys. A lot of adrenaline, a lot of noise, feels good when you're up at altitude. In a formation with Hueys, we call them slicks. And you can look out and see the other guys with their feet dangling, and we're all loaded for bear, we're heavily armed. And as a beginner descent, there was always a little more tension. You like to sit on your helmet, actually, so that any rounds coming through the bottom of the helicopter might be deflected by your helmet. But at a certain point, you secure your helmet and you get ready to come in, and depending on the terrain and what's going on, the door gunners usually open up. And on one particular day, we had a gunship come by, almost laying on its side, shooting rockets right by us, and I thought, how'd that guy do that? I couldn't believe he had blade clearance. He wasn't going to hit the ground, and nobody would fall out the left-hand side of the ship, because he was, he was turned over on his left side. It was just amazing. And all hell breaks loose, and there's a lot of gunfire and a lot of tracers going out, and sometimes there's green tracers coming back. That's always interesting.
So you're being inserted into an area. It's a hot LZ. Do you touch down? Do you jump off, and then do you set up a perimeter? What do you do?
Yeah, depending on what the LZ looks like, there's always, usually someone has made a reconnaissance beforehand, and so the plan, the aircraft commanders are briefed, and based on where your ship is positioned in the formation, you're going to head for a tree line immediately in front of you, or you're going to fan out to your 7 o'clock or whatever, and you're going to attempt with the unit that you're inserting to secure the LZ. If we don't have enough lift to bring your entire company in, sometimes it's up in the Highlands, we have sometimes one ship LZs, so it's a little bit precarious getting people in and out, so you have to make sure that you can secure the LZ as best as possible.
So how soon after you're in country are you on these combat assaults? Right away? They just start right away?
When we got to our base camp at Ankei, we had some jungle school. We had some little training about booby traps and about snipers and about the VC versus North Vietnamese regulars, what to expect from the population. Just a pretty practical 7-day immersion in welcome to Vietnam. And from then we started operating, and I subsequently operated all over the Central Highlands in deep double and triple canopy jungle. Mainly in the, we spent a lot of time out in the tri-border area where Vietnam meets Laos and Cambodia. Primal virgin wilderness, a lot of it, and beautiful.
So you have a line? Are you moving in a squad? Are you a platoon? How are you advancing? How are you engaging the enemy as you go into the Central Highlands? What are you doing?
Essentially, it's like an armed camping trip. There's no such thing as carrying too much ammunition or too much water. And in the Highlands, we operated in company strength formations most of the time until the battles at Dak To, when we had some units that were cut off and overrun, and they decided to operate 2 rifle companies in close proximity so one could attempt to get to the other, although the terrain was extremely difficult. And essentially, in the morning, we had a recondo squad or a point squad that was set out. I was the squad leader up there for a while. Get with the old man, the captain, every morning. We would coordinate our maps. He would tell me where we wanted to go. I had an RTO, a guy carrying my radio, a point guy and a couple other guys. We had a shotgun. Sometimes we had a dog and a dog handler. And essentially, we would attempt to navigate from point A to point B. The maps weren't good. The communication was not optimal, difficult in the Highlands particularly. And the company would usually move in a 2-column formation, and the point would be out front, having to break all the ground. And these 2 columns that would be moving would also have flank security out. You would have to change that flank security all the time because of the heat and because of the thickness of the jungle, and those guys had to break their own trail, and very, very exhaustive work.
Now, how old are you again at this time?
I am 61.
No, at that time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was 21. I was an old guy. We had a lot of 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds, and I was an old guy at 21. And actually, I turned 22 in March, and they couldn't believe that their squad leader was such an old guy.
So, what kind of things are you having your squad do? I mean, is it routine? Does it like a lot of boredom with moments of sheer terror, as they say? I mean, is that what it's like? Or
yes, I think that's an apt description. There are hours and days of boredom punctuated by moments of abject terror, because when things break loose, sometimes it's difficult to know what's going on. We weren't in contact all the time. We would go for days, sometimes weeks without contact. And then there were other times where it seemed like we would extract from one place and get inserted into another, and there was a lot of things going on. But the popular Hollywood or media image that they're just razors flying through the air and bullets singing by your ear constantly is probably not valid.
So who are you fighting over there? Who's our enemy?
Mainly, we engaged mainly North Vietnamese regulars. We were involved with a few Viet Cong when we were down at Tui Hoa, but for the most part, those were weekend warriors that wore, you know, loincloths and we're lucky to have a CKC or something. We primarily were maneuvering against North Vietnamese regulars, and they were well equipped, well armed, well led. They had good NCOs. They were pretty tough, and to this day I have a lot of respect for them.
Tell me about the uncertainty of what you did. Wasn't there a lot of uncertainty? I mean, was that stressful in Vietnam, the guerrilla type warfare, and just, like I said, maybe not a real defined enemy, or maybe the NVA was, but...
Well, the NVA was, and the object was, you know, in the infantry, the mission is to close with the enemy and by means of fire and maneuver, capture or destroy him. And, you know, that's what we did. We were out there looking for them, looking to engage them, and sometimes we bit off more than we could chew. And the 173rd Airborne took a very high level of casualties and has a very, very distinguished record in Vietnam, and I'm very, very proud to have been associated with such a great group of guys. They weren't fearless, but they were brave.
Tell me about some of the casualties that were sustained while you were there. Were they friends that you knew, and were you able to help any of them? Give me some stories that you might remember about that.
Well, we always had medics with us. Each platoon had a medic, and the medics stayed pretty busy. One of the medics, right after I changed battalions from the unit I went over with to a sister battalion, they had lost most of their NCOs and officers at the battles at Dak To, Thanksgiving of 1967. And I went up there as one of the NCO replacements. Right after I left my unit that I'd trained with and started operations with, they hit a hot LZ, and I remember a very young medic named Swellenbach who was so baby-faced and so young, and we were always teasing him, and he was always saying, "When it hits the fan, guys, I'll be there for you." And sure enough, I guess on that day, I can't remember, I think it was December 26th of 1967, Swellenbach indeed was there for those guys and was mortally wounded. And my friends were unable to get out to him, and he was laying out there screaming into a bright morning, "Mom, please don't let me die." And I guess it just had a very eerie and shaking effect on all of the other brothers, but they couldn't get to him because of automatic weapons fire and so forth. So Swellenbach and Sergeant Clarence Adams and a lot of guys I knew that made the ultimate sacrifice, I will always remember, and I will always be immensely proud of them.
When you're fighting in Vietnam, are you conscious of fighting for, you know, God and country, or is it a matter of survival?
You know, it's pretty much a survival thing. There's sort of an innate sense amongst most people that you are on the side of right, that you're wearing the white hat. I think ultimately our intentions there were honorable, and somehow these things tend to get distorted, and sometimes the equation gets thickened by politicians. You know, the rules of engagement, some of them are insidious and absolutely preposterous and ridiculous and dangerous. But for the most part, if our efforts weren't micromanaged, you know, when I left, we were everything but winning that war militarily. To this day, I don't think we lost that war militarily. I think we lost that war politically. And I see history repeating itself right now, and it makes me very unhappy.
I agree. Were there any major engagements that you had? Not that anything you had wasn't major, but like anything historically in your year there that I might be familiar with that you were involved with over there?
I transferred up to the 2nd Battalion of the 503rd Airborne Infantry on the last day of the battle on Thanksgiving of '67 at Hill 875. The brigade fed about 3 battalions into that grinder, and it was one of the major battles of the Vietnam War. I got on the very tail end of it. The NVA had scattered and, for the most part, gone over the hill into Laos and Cambodia. There were a lot of, when we decimate them like that, they have a tendency to go into 3-man cells and E&E, escape and evade, and attempt to reunite with the remnants of their units. And so, for the weeks following that, there was a lot of firefight encounters, just anonymous firefights that erupt in the jungle, and there were quite a few of those. But the brigade sustained incredibly heavy casualties at Dak To. First, beginning in June of '67, and then in October and November of '67, they were involved in some major battles. I got in just on the very tail end of those.
Were you like a replacement going in, or what?
I was a Sergeant E5, but because Charlie Company of 2nd Battalion at Hill 875 was hit by a 500-pound bomb from one of our own aircraft. The result was our chaplain, most of our officers, and most of the people in the aid station, and a lot of the NCOs were killed. So the 2nd Battalion had its head cut off, in effect, and so there was, they had to draw a bunch of replacement NCOs and officers from other elements in the brigade, which just happened to be the 3rd Battalion, which was operating south at Tuiwa at that time, and I was one of those people. When I got on the C-130 and went to and it flew to the Special Forces airstrip at Dak To, I thought the airplane had crashed. I thought it had been shot down or crashed. It landed so hard and so violently. And when I got off, there were piles of helmets, piles of M16s, piles of fatigues, all bloody and burnt and melted and smoked. And I thought, my God, I've come to the wrong place. But I'm here to tell the tale, so that's what counts.
How would you define combat, Mike?
Well, it's, I don't know how I would define it. It's, there's a lot of adrenaline. You have a lot of thirst afterwards. For the most part, I knew some people who were very, very cool under fire. Sometimes it's very difficult to ascertain in thick country where the fire is coming from. You can't even see muzzle flashes sometimes. In more open country, it's kind of a different bag. Sometimes you can see people running, and it's a whole different matter. But close in, it's very difficult for command and control. It's difficult. It's so noisy. It's difficult for voice command with troops. And we had some really excellent officers and NCOs, and again, it was my privilege to serve with them.
How about the sound of combat? What would you tell me, what does combat sound like?
Well, there's a distinctive sound that an M16 rifle makes, and sometimes our point would shoot, and then there'd be, there's always that eternal nanosecond where you're waiting, you're straining to hear a return fire, because an AK or an SKS sounds very different, or an RPD, which is a Soviet or a Chi-Com machine gun. Once you hear those, the fight is joined. There's a lot of distinctive sounds. We had an M79 grenade launcher that we called a thumper. It would make a thunk sound when it would shoot a 40-millimeter projectile. We carried a 90-millimeter recoilless rifle that fired beehive rounds. It was like a giant shotgun shell. We had our point guy always carried a 12-gauge Savage shotgun. There were guys shooting 45s, M16s, M60 machine guns, grenade launchers, grenades, throwing grenades, that sort of thing. So there's a cacophony of noise, if you would, and it's all different. And you add to that the sound of their fire. Their machine guns are much more staccato and rapid fire than our M60 was. They were very, very identifiable. So you just, it's a year in my life that I'll never forget. Changed forever the way I see things.
And that was one of my other questions. How did that change you as a person, as a young man, and how did that affect you even today?
Well, I vowed never to take anything for granted again, whether it was a hot shower, a cheeseburger, a cold beer, lots of worldly or even less mundane things. But I always have worn this D-Roast bracelet to remind me not to do that. The mountain yards up in the Highlands wore entire armloads of these things. And they were incredible little people. I've always wondered what has happened to all of them. They were always the odd man out in Vietnam. They were referred to as the Moi, which means savages. The men wore loincloths and hunted with crossbows. And the Special Forces befriended them and trained them earlier on in the war. They fought on our side for most of the war, and they're tough little guys, and I've always wondered about them. Back to your question about how has it changed me, I know that freedom isn't free. I know this country sends our people into harm's way and asks them to make sacrifices, and to this point, I don't think it's been for any causes that were not worthwhile. Today is, this is a dangerous planet right now, and if I was 30 years younger, I would happily be in Afghanistan or Iraq. I wish I could be.
How about when you're in Vietnam? How did the country's maybe perception of the war affect your morale in country over there? I mean, were you hearing about protests at that time and things that were going on?
We knew those things were going on for the most part. In 67 and 68, we still enjoyed a lot of support. I had a very memorable Christmas Eve in 1967 when we managed to get to a hilltop fire support base out in the middle of nowhere, and helicopters started coming in, slicks started coming in with mail sacks, and we got boxes and boxes and boxes of things from Girl Scout troops in Springfield, Illinois, to all addressed to a soldier at the front. And there were treats and food and sausages and all kinds of incredible things that we hadn't seen for a long time because we just lived on sea rations and pretty much stayed out in the jungle. So there was a lot of support, and I just hope that Americans can stay the course in supporting their military.
Were there downtimes, where you had to, process all the things happening in the field, or were you always pumped up, or were there times of, reflecting on what had happened, maybe the friends you lost, the casualties in the brigade? How do you de-stress, or whatever the word is?
Well, there was an omnipresent, threat out there all the time that you could be engaged at any time. It's dangerous to be complacent. It's dangerous to let your guard down. At the same time, when we did come in from an op, I think one time we were out for almost 56 days. We would resupply every fourth day by helicopter, if there was a helicopter. Sometimes we didn't get that, and I carried 9 quarts of water, and we all carried 4 days of rations. And there were days when we didn't eat because the resupply didn't come. But when we got back to base, they were very nice about there would be maybe a Jeep trailer iced down with beer, and our battalion cooks would be out there with big grills making steaks for us. And you know what? They tried to make it as civil as possible for us when we did have some downtime.
Were there drugs used in Vietnam?
There were drugs used. I think most of the hard drug problem really came into being in 69 and 70. There was marijuana. I never saw a dead North Vietnamese that didn't have a dope bag on him. There was certainly marijuana used by our troops. It was just one of those things that happened. It certainly wasn't a policy that was condoned. As a matter of fact, it was court-martial offense to be caught with any of that stuff. There was some of that use. As a sergeant, I told my guys, you know what, you don't use drugs when we're in the field on an op. You could get someone killed. You have a responsibility to your brothers here and your mates, and you know what, we can't be slacking. My job is to get all you guys home with all your arms and legs and testicles and all your parts.
Did you lose men under your command, though?
I had some guys wounded. I never had anybody killed. I'm really happy about that.
Have you ever been back to the Vietnam Wall?
I've been to the wall several times. It's a spirit place. I think it's a really powerful place. I think it's just a powerful place.
Why did you go the first time, and did you find names?
You know, I never have looked for a name. You get there and there's just almost a supernatural force when you look at that big black V sunk into the side of the hill there, and you know, there's some quietude, and boy, there's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of people communicating, either talking to themselves or talking to the wall or thinking hard, and there's just a lot of stuff going on there at any given time. It's kind of a cosmic place.
It is powerful. I've been there. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Even not having served, it's a very moving for me to go there. As a veteran, Mike, and an American citizen, you know, you kind of touched on it, but what does freedom mean to you?
Freedom means my or your ability to get in your car and go where you want, to attend the church of your choice, to go to any movie, read any book you want to read. We have a lot of luxuries in this country, and for all the people that hate it so much, I don't understand, you know, why they're not a little more proactive in trying to affect some positive change. Certainly this country, our system, our society has warts. We're not perfect. I believe we are the best country on the planet to live in, and freedom is not free. And you know what? My hat is off to all of our young people who are out there in harm's way right now, because what the left and what the naysayers and what the America haters don't understand is the world is a dangerous place, and there's a whole lot of people out there who essentially want to kill us. We're infidels, and their belief is that if we don't see it their way, they'll kill us.
That's true. What would you tell a young person today who was born in this country, takes their freedoms for granted, and doesn't have any idea really that it was bought and paid for? What would you tell them about the price for freedom and how to preserve and protect those freedoms?
I heard someone say the other day that, how did that go? If you don't believe in something, you won't fight for it. I believe in the flag. I believe in this country. I believe in the sacrifice that veterans have made to this point. I think our schools don't teach history, and the history they do teach is pretty PC now. And as somebody who loves books and loves history, I am aware of what happened to Marines at Guadalcanal and Tarawa and Peleliu and Iwo Jima. I'm aware what paratroopers and Rangers did on D-Day. You know, I know guys, Rangers that parachuted into Panama and were engaged a minute and a half on the ground, some of them grievously wounded. These Rangers that jumped from 500 feet onto a concrete runway in anti-aircraft fire in Grenada. That's incredible. It's all incredible. They're brave people, and they put themselves into harm's way because they have a value system. They have a structure of beliefs that tells them, you know what, I could put my ass on the line because this is worth it. And you know what, they're paying for everybody. We got a lot of people in this country that haven't paid any dues, and I guess, you know what, that's their option. But for the ones that do, I really appreciate it.
Well said. What does the American flag mean and represent to you?
It represents this country and everything that this country's been through. I think it demands respect. For those people that wish not to respect it, well, you know what? We are a free nation, and whatever nebulous issues get resolved legally about whether it's a First Amendment right to spit on it or burn it or whatever. Again, these are the things our people have died for dissidents' rights, right to protest these kind of things. But I respect the flag. I think it has a huge amount of significance, and it troubles me greatly when I see people trampling it or burning it, whether it's here or somewhere else in the world.
Mike, what should people remember about Vietnam?
I think that people should know that that we got close to 59,000 names on a wall, and each one of those names represents somebody that went over there and made a sacrifice. To this day, people argue and dispute each other about why we were there. Some people are just convinced that it was terribly immoral, that it was a Wall Street expansionist motive, that there was all kinds of ridiculous things that the left stays up late trying to think up, I guess. I think it had to do with us drawing a line with respect to worldwide communism. I think it also had everything to do with the right to self-determination for about 17 million people in South Vietnam. Ultimately, our politicians sold those people down the river, and they communicated to the world that our word is no good, that our resolve is no good. And you know what? I don't think anything could be further from the truth. But this is what happens when commanders on the ground are micromanaged from people 6,000 miles away who may or may not have a good perspective about what's going on. Certainly the South Vietnamese government had credibility issues in terms of corruption or this or that, but you know what? I don't think there are any governmental agencies out there, entities on the planet, that don't have those difficulties. It's a matter of time, it's a matter of resolve, it's a matter of patience. History right now is repeating itself, and the quitters would appear to be having the edge, and it breaks my heart.
When you were in combat in Vietnam, were there people that you could help, like the wounded? I know there were medics and things, but did you personally ever help anybody that was wounded?
Yes, I had a young man, a great big farm kid, a black guy from rural North Carolina, who was out walking flank security one day for us, and he got shot 5 times. And all of a sudden it's very quiet, and we're all down. And I said, "Benjamin, can you hear me?" He said, "Yes, Sergeant Marsh." I said, "Are you okay?" He says, "I think so, Sergeant Marsh." Well, ultimately, I went out there and got him. And we got a morphine syringe in him, and got him just it was dense brush, but you know, he wasn't more than 50 feet away. And he walked to the helicopter. We got him a dust-off, a medevac helicopter in there, and he was really lucky. He had 5 flesh wounds, and by the time the dust-off got there, that morphine had him feeling pretty okay. And so he was evac'd out. He was not seriously injured. I think he was shot in the buttocks and had a flesh wound through the wrist and a couple through his hip, but it was miraculous. He was a good kid, and ultimately he was returned to service with us, to duty with us, and I was really happy to see him back.
So you were sergeant of a platoon or a squad? Did you say?
A squad.
So did you call in medevacs, or is that somebody else's job?
No, each rifle platoon had a lieutenant who was in charge and a platoon sergeant, and each company had a captain who was in command, and the lieutenant platoon leaders answered to him. Normally it was the captain, unless he was disabled, who would do that. We usually had an Air Force forward air controller with us, a FAC on the ground, who handled the fast movers, who handled the tactical airstrikes. And we usually had some forward observers attached to us from our organic artillery, either from our own battalion mortar sections or 4-deuce mortars, or other artillery units that were supporting us in that area. And most of the time these FOs would be talking to their FDCs, talking to their artillery batteries, be the ones in the command group who were handling the tactical air and the artillery support.
How close did you ever personally get to the enemy? Like we are this close, or were they always at a distance?
I ran into some North Vietnamese, 3 of them by happenstance, probably 15 feet away. We saw each other at the same time. They popped back down over a hillock, and I was putting a claymore mine in at the time, and I rolled over and got off a couple of shots and got back to where my guys were. But I was startled to see them that close. I've seen a lot of them closer that were dead, but the live ones, you didn't really see too much.
You've got M16?
Yes.
As a young man in combat and with the others around you, I mean, is it hard the first time maybe you kill somebody, or does it get easier, if that's for lack of better words, or it's not as intense maybe later on, or I mean, are those things that happen?
I'm not aware of more than 2 occasions where I actually saw bullets from my rifle strike a guy. After the first firefight I was in, I went into what somebody told me was adrenaline shock, and I'd pumped so much adrenaline that after it was all over, I was laying there on the ground on my back quaking, and it started raining, and I was shivering and quaking, and we carried empty sandbags, and my guys would take and cover me with their empty sandbags and took turns laying on top of me until the rain stopped, and I finally stopped quaking, and that was the first and the only time that really happened to me, but I thought it was very unusual.
Amazing. Go through things like that at such a young age, you know? Do you have any problems coming home when you came home, transitioning back into civilian life?
Actually, I came home a little bit early. I got a drop so I could go to school, and I was attending classes at College of San Mateo about 15 days maybe after I got home and out of the Army. And I got a job at Delta Airlines at San Francisco International. My first wife lived in the Bay Area while I was overseas, and I stayed there 11 years, even though I'm from Denver. And overall, I felt like, hey, I survived this war. I'll never have to do a hard thing again in my life, which was wrong. Youthful naivete again, but that's okay. I was pretty tolerant of the people who were opposed to the war. I thought, well, that's their deal. My thoughts mainly were about my mates who were still out there in the mud, back in the jungle, back living that misery. And there's a lot of physical misery involved with it.
Why do you think you survived that a lot of others didn't?
You know, I always just had a very, very innate, strong sense that I would survive this war. Before I went, some of my friends said, well, what happens if you get killed? I said, well, what happens if I get killed is I get killed. I really had a lot of confidence that wasn't going to happen to me. But then again, war is a very, very random thing. We were always joking about, we're not concerned about that bullet with your name on it. We were more concerned about the one addressed to occupant. Terribly random.
Because a lot of the veterans that I've talked to have had problems, have come back home, and post-traumatic stress and things like that, and not having any help really to go back into the real world, I guess. I don't know. But you look like you've done very well for yourself.
Thank you. I've had some issues, and I've addressed them with the VA, and they've dismissed them as not being valid or pertinent or whatever. So the bottom line is, I came back. It's something that forever changed my life, and it's something that is probably the crowning, the best thing that I've ever done in my life. The camaraderie, the excitement, all of it is something that I will simply never forget.
Did you read the article in the paper, or did you see the 9 News broadcast?
Actually, I just happened to be on break in our lunchroom when you were being interviewed on television. I was interrupted speaking to someone and missed it. 3 minutes later, my cell phone rang, and it was my neighbor who had taken down your number. And he knows that I'm pretty passionate about military history and about these kind of things, and I called you.
It's important, I think, that people learn about what happened in Vietnam and not just, the left side, whatever you want to say, just things that are unreported. That's what I'm trying to capture.
Oh, and you know what? I mean, the media gave Jane Fonda a pass. They gave the Cambodians a pass. I mean, here we got literally genocide on a massive scale occurring in Cambodia. We have, when we leave there, we generate a refugee problem on a magnitude of human suffering that the world hadn't seen recently with respect to the boat people. They had re-education camps. They liquidated most of the intelligentsia in South Vietnam. They killed millions in Cambodia. These are Miss Fonda's friends. They're not friends of mine. Although I respect them, they're not my friends. You know what? The press and the anti-war people gave them a pass. Just like today. They can hang bodies from a bridge in Fallujah and burn them. They can cut off people's heads. They can blow up children on soccer fields, and there's no indignation. The press is not there to question these people. I think the world is cowering. It is meek. It is too politically correct, and there's trouble coming. Trouble's already here. We just don't want to address it. And for as many differences as I have with the direction the administration has taken on some things, I have to give our president credit for being apparently the only guy on the planet with the cojones to stand up to these people. And there's going to be more trouble before things are better, I'm convinced.
Are you proud that you're a Vietnam veteran?
Absolutely. Very proud.
People thank you for your service?
People do, all the time. As a matter of fact, recently, it seems like in the last few years, people have even been more astute at doing that, or more, I don't know why I would be more aware of it, but people do. If I wear a hat that has paratrooper wings on it, or it says 173rd Airborne Brigade or something on it, they say, hey, what did you do? Thank you very much. And that's very nice.
I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. I ask all the veterans at the end of my interviews, Mike, hope it's okay. From where you're seated, can you give me a salute into the camera when I tell you to?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great. Okay, Sarah, go ahead. Great, thank you. Excellent.